All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Really looking forward to kicking off the week today with Ray. I'm going to introduce Ray in just a moment. But before I do, I want to give a shout out to those who are starting to tune in live via YouTube. Don't forget that you can get in on the action. Use the chat sidebar on the right. Let us know where you're watching from. I see someone already introduced themselves. Bob in Southern California. Great to have you joining in. It's so awesome to still be able to do these live events and broadcast them live into homes of students, of parents, and of educators. So we've got a huge week coming up here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and we are going to get things started right now. Pretty excited to be hosting Ray Zahab. He is a Canadian explorer, ultra-distance runner, and founder of the nonprofit Impossible to Possible. He's an explorer in residence of the Royal Canadian Geographic Society, and in 2015, Canadian Geographic recognized him as one of Canada's top explorers. He's run over 17,000 kilometers across the world's deserts and taken part in all kinds of unsupported expeditions in some of the coldest places on the planet. His goal has always been to share these incredible places and stories with the people he meets, but of course with classrooms, students all over the world. Ray, it's so awesome to have you joining us live today. We're excited to get to know you a little better.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here. I'm stoked to share some stories. Do I just go? Is that what happened?
All right, I'm going to throw things to you. It's all you for a little bit, Ray.
Thank you so much. Well, listen, everyone, it's great to be here and so excited to share some of these stories of these places that I've been. And I get a lot of questions about what exactly is it that I do as an explorer. And when people first hear that term, explorer, they have it in their mind that I must be some sort of mountain climber, which of course would make sense. But I am not. I have a bit of an adversity, a bit of a fear of heights. Instead, I am more like a horizontal explorer. I'm a runner, and I crossed vast distances, vast geographies on foot. That's kind of my deal. I like to cross deserts. I like to cross cold regions that are icy. And I thought what I would do is start out sharing with you, I'm going to make sure I press the right button, a series of photographs that will sort of, give you an idea of what it is that I do. So I'm just going to do this, and hopefully that is working. Is that working right now?
No, it didn't pop up yet.
Okay, where's the little share button?
Yeah, right down in the middle menu.
All right, let me see here. Share. How's that?
There we go. That's magic.
Perfect. So my expeditions take many forms. And essentially what I do is through a pre-planned route, cross a desert or a frozen landscape. Sometimes on these expeditions, when I'm running up to 60, 70 kilometers per day, I'm supported. Many times I'm unsupported. And it's a differentiation in terms, because you got to think about this. Like in this photograph, this is me in Namibia. I ran 1,850 kilometers across the Namib Desert from the South African border almost to the Angolan border. To run that far and carry all the water that you would need to drink would be virtually impossible, because your backpack would be the size of one of those sand dunes. So I have a crew that I meet every 20 or so kilometers that provides me with the hydration and the food that I need to get the job done. So that's what's in my backpack right there. I'm heading out, I'm leaving a camp. I've got all the water I need to make it for the next 20 kilometers. And I was with my teammate Stefano on that expedition. In stark contrast, on an Arctic expedition or a winter expedition, I'm actually able to haul everything with me and be self-contained or unsupported. No one else out there. This is a photograph of my friend Stefano and I. This was taken in the Kamchatka Peninsula in far east Russia. We were in a mountain range. This photo was taken, I think, 18 or 19 days after we left the West Coast. First time we saw our friends, and they grabbed this photo as we were climbing up through this mountain range to meet them for the first time. So those sleds basically have everything that we need to survive in this cold and frosty environment. And when you're in these colder environments, you're in places that are so remote. Sometimes you're dropped by helicopter and you get there, and it's what you've got with you, the clothing that you've packed, the gear that's in your sled, the food that you have. That's your life for the entire expedition when you're going unsupported. So you can see in this photo here, all of my supplies are tucked into that bag. I've got all of my warm weather gear in my backpack and in those underneath the ropes on my sled, so that if I should get cold or need to change out, I'm ready to go. Now, being in cold environments around the world, or in the hot ones as well, it's important to know and learn about the environment and take as much knowledge as you possibly can. This is my buddy Billy Arnacook from Kikik Tarjwak in Nunavut. I started visiting with Billy and learning from him to be as prepared as I could be for my Arctic expeditions. Going up north and being there in the middle of winter, you really have to respect that environment. One time when I was with Billy, we were on snow machines and we stopped because we'd seen these giant footprints in the snow that were the size of a seat cushion. I mean, they were huge, right? And I'd never seen tracks like these. This is the ocean you're looking at, frozen in the middle of winter, giant footprints. So we walk over to these footprints, we glance down and I said, oh my gosh, are those polar bear tracks? And Billy looked at me and he said, yeah, they sure are. Those are polar bear tracks. Oh, and I looked down at the polar bear tracks and I looked over, I said, do you think there's any polar bears out here? And he looked at me without even batting an eyelash. And he said, well, do you see any tracks? In other words, yes, of course the polar bears are out there. We're in the land of the polar bear. And so it was just that first lesson in respecting that place that I was in and appreciating that when you're in these remote environments, these places are beautiful, but also can be very dangerous if you're not fully prepared and aware of what's going on around you. But saying all of that, my favorite part of my expeditions is being able to share the places that I'm in, no matter how remote they are, using satellite technology, uploading photos and videos, so people, students especially, can get a feel of what these remote places look like. This is the Canadian Arctic in February. Really cold, minus 50 degrees. There I am. My teammate Stefano took this photo with an iPhone. He took this video. Not sure if can you hear that wind. So he took this video of me. Look at the sun. It looks huge, reflecting off of the cold ice crystals in the atmosphere. You've got that wind blowing. I'm on this last part of frozen river on the coast of Baffin Island. We uploaded that video via satellite to the internet, and students all over the world were able to get a glimpse of what does wind that's minus 60 look like. And you could almost feel it in that video. So being able to connect these remote places with students all over the world is really the purpose of my expeditions. Share these places that I go and the landscapes, but not just the landscapes, the compelling stories of the people that I meet when I'm on expedition. When I was running 1,000 kilometers across the Patagonian desert, this is one of the many deserts. You can go to my website and see the other ones, tons there. When I was crossing the Patagonian desert with my friend Stefano, as we made our way up into the high plateau of the desert, the Meseta region of the Patagonian desert, we started to see cowboys all over the place, working the land like it was a bygone era, ranching. And the further we got, right up as close to the Andes mountain range, we visited a few very small communities where we met people that were still living this lifestyle that seemed so long forgotten back at home. On our way across the Meseta, the landscape looked like the moon. It was 1,000,000 degrees outside. It was so hot. And Stefano and I are running across these rocks. And we knew that we had planned over the years of getting this route ready with our crew, pretty much specifically where we would get our next water drop or meet up with our team to get some water. We had about 20 kilometers left to go. And we're in this rocky moon-like landscape and we're running and it's super hot. We're 20 kilometers to our next water resupply and we're running along. And lo and behold, in the distance, we could see a crater in the ground, a giant crater sort of opened up in the distance, 3-4 kilometers away. You can see forever in the desert. And down in this crater, right in the center of it, was a house. And it was so far away, we could just make it out that there was a house in this crater. I said to Stefano, oh my gosh, there's a house down in that giant hole over there. Who would choose to live in that giant hole and why, right? We didn't know the answer until 19 kilometers later. We come rolling up to within 900 meters of our checkpoint, which would be over a next drop. And in front of us on our left-hand side opened up another giant crater. And down in this crater, we could see much closer to us, just a kilometer away, was another house. And Stefano and I decided that we had to go and see who lived in this house. So we called our team. We had our satellite phones with us for safety, among other gear. And we said, guys, you got to come back here. Here's our waypoint. A waypoint is a number in the GPS. It's a geographical position where people can come and find us. So they came back and they met us, and we crawled down the side of the crater, and we went over and knocked onto the door. Mr. Garcia comes to the door, and he invites us into his home. And right away, my crew, among which one of my friends who speaks much better Spanish than I do, was doing some translation. And we learned about his life there and why they, and it's not just Mr. Garcia, why a number of people in this Meseta region, over 70,000 hectares big, this area, if memory serves me correct, about this lifestyle here that these 25 or so families live. And so he's telling us stories about the winters there, how brutal the winters can be. Yet when they, in winter, in their homes, which are, and their ranches, which are built into these depressions and craters in the area, they have protection from the elements. And he was telling me stories about how while working the range, if you will, tending to the livestock of not only him, but his neighbors, of whom he knew all of these people over the course of this 70,000 hectare area, he would gather little bits of wood that would blow in from the lowlands, and he would use this to burn into his wood stove throughout the winter. And the more that I spoke with him, the more I realized what a fascinating and incredible man this was. And we were meeting him and learning his story and the story of life on the Meseta because we chose to run here, because we chose to be in this place and run. It reminded me of how impactful it can be to visit a place on an adventure, to be there on the ground, on your feet. It's not just the amazing landscapes, it's the incredible people that we get to meet and come across while in these places. Now, these places, I'm very fortunate to have been on an expedition in some of the hottest places and the coldest places. I've met people all over the world. There's people living almost in every corner of this planet, and they've been able to share stories and learn from them and share their stories with the schools who are following along. But it's when you have that sort of that magic mix of incredible landscape, incredible culture, and timing is just right. That's when the stories are really cool to share, especially exciting for me. When I ran across the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, which is huge, it was over 2,000 kilometers. I ran across it alone. And I actually ran across and purposefully ran across Mongolia during the time of Nadam. The Nadam festival, something that takes place every summer in Mongolia, and it's a festival of culture, and 3 events in specific are celebrated during the Nadam festival: horse racing, archery, and wrestling. And you're seeing vignettes of all of this. This is my crew. The people who supply me with my water on my long runs also double as my film crew and photographers. So they're doing 5,000 things at once. They capture the stories of these small communities and Nadam and what it means to have these cultural icons who are wrestlers. And as I said before, archers or 8-year-olds racing horses across the desert. They would capture their stories, edit those stories, and through the story of our daily run in the region that we were in, they would upload those stories to the internet, and schools could follow along through our website and learn about what it was like to be in Mongolia at that time of year. So it's collaborating with people to share stories that is so exciting and compelling for me, and using a live website, obviously, to share these expeditions, basically immerse them, bring them into classrooms and bring classrooms with me out there. That's really what it's all about. And I answer questions on my websites during my expeditions. That's another part of my job that I love so much. One of my favorite questions I get when I'm in deserts is, how hot is it? How hot can it get? Well, if you're in Death Valley, California, it can get really hot, like hot enough to make the rubber on the bottom of your running shoes start to fall off in pieces on these hot rocks, hot enough to fry an egg kind of thing, right? This is a photo of a thermometer. That's the ground temperature in Death Valley, California in summer 2011. I went from the most northern part of Death Valley National Park to the southern end, completely off-road with a buddy of mine. And we experienced things in the extreme heat that were just extraordinary. Like storms, rainstorms that were happening, and lightning and thunder going on above us. And it's raining. It's 60 degrees Celsius. I mean, it was a billion degrees in the middle of the Badwater Basin, and it's raining. And some of those rain droplets are evaporating. You can smell it in the air. It smelled like springtime in Canada, but it's super duper hot. And in the distance, you have a rainbow. So it's being able to experience those phenomena in these places too, and share that instant moment that's so exciting. This is my friend Dave. He was crewing on that expedition. He's standing in a part of Death Valley that's known as the Devil's Golf Course. It's a bunch of salt that is formed, a salt bed or a salt lake that has formed these sort of stalactites of salt that can be razor sharp. He's obviously not very happy, you can see in that photo, because he had to provide me with the water and walk out there and wait for us. But that's what the ground can be like in a desert. And I get a lot of questions about the terrain that I'm on. What's it like running in a desert, in a hot desert? This is a photo of me in a different desert. This is in South America, in Chile. It's the Atacama Desert, the driest place on earth. And in this desert, as I was making my way 1,200 kilometers across, I had minimal resupplies. My buddy Bob would be out there, and he would meet me every 20 to 50 kilometers and give me the water that I needed. And every time I would see Bob, I'd say, oh, the rocks are so sore on my feet. They're hurting my feet, Bobby. I don't know how much longer I can go. And to give you an idea what it can do, well, check this out.
Start of day, I think we're on day 7. And had another great day yesterday, got 70K in, 40 miles. But I've been nursing a blister while I've been out here. This is what it looks like. Check this out.
Oh, it's just disgusting. Look at that blister. What is that? So that is what it can do to you when you're in the heat and on the ground. So that answered that question, right? But again, going back and forth from these different environments, whether I'm in Siberia pulling a sled unsupported across that ice, or in the Canadian Arctic, like I talked about at the beginning of my presentation today, we're experiencing amazing things while on foot. We're meeting amazing people while on foot on an adventure. This photo was taken in Siberia on Lake Baikal in 2010. And the most astonishing part of this ice, which is actually the clearest ice on the planet, is that I could see fish frozen down in the ice like they had stopped in time. And I was on video at one point during this expedition saying to students, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. There's a school of fish stuck underneath my feet right now in water that you could see a meter down. Being on expedition to the South Pole, you couldn't be any further from home than the top of the bottom of the world on Antarctica, but yet still we were able to take video captions and photos. It was a little bit slower of a process, but the internet was there for us even in 2009. We were able to upload stories and talk about and build a curriculum around the history of Antarctic exploration, of what it's like to be in the world's largest desert, crossing these crevasses, which were endlessly deep, taking that expedition again and moving it into a classroom and having students around the world be able to tap in. And as a matter of fact, with my expedition support teammate and logistics coordinator, we're able to take that a step further by providing expeditions for young people between the ages of 16 and 21. And that's what Bob and I do as volunteers. We create an organization called Impossible to Possible, where young people, this is the best part of my job, it's the part of the job that I love the most, and it's the part I don't get paid for, but it's the part I love, is taking young people on these expeditions that are based on sort of my own adventures, going out there and running a certain distance every day and being able to tie it to a curriculum and teach that curriculum live to students around the world. So being in the Amazon jungle, for example, for youth ambassadors, you're 16, 17, you're literally in the middle of the Brazilian Amazon, trekking through deep swamps and sharing the story of biodiversity and what it's like to be in the Amazon jungle, what it's like to be in basically ground zero in one of the most biodiverse regions of the planet, and sharing that with students.
We're in the Amazon rainforest. It's pouring rain. It's exactly what I thought the rainforest would be. This has got to be the coolest day of my life. I'm on cloud 9 right now. This is awesome.
So as an explorer, it's being able to share these places, not just through my own adventures, but through the adventures of young people in this organization that I'm so proud of. That really is what my job as an explorer is all about. It's giving young people an idea, a notion, and a philosophy that I believe in, that in each and every one of us is the capacity to do something extraordinary and to be extraordinary in our own way. Uh, I've often said, because people ask me, well, you call it impossible to possible. I say, well, yeah, you know what? When human beings get together, or when we in ourselves find the strength to make a decision and take a chance, and really, really hang it out there and do the best we can and just shoot for a goal that perhaps doesn't seem possible, we become freed from all boundaries. And with that, Joe, I'd like to throw it over to you and take some questions, if that's okay. I've sort of raced through a bunch of stuff here because I wanted to give you guys a landscape of what it is that I do.
All right. Awesome, Ray. Thanks so much. I mean, those photos are incredible. I can see why you love to be out there in just the wilderness and just pushing yourself to the limits. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you so much. Now, do I stop share, or do I just keep...
Yeah, stop the share so we get you nice and big again.
Okay, let me figure out how to do this. There we
Perfect.
go.
We gotcha.
Perfect.
All right. Well, to those tuning in today, use the chat sidebar on the right and send us in some questions. And let's get started with one right now. Ben would like to know how many countries you have had your adventures in.
Ooh, Ben, that's a great question. So I have ran, I've tried to add, I keep trying to add it up because, but I've ran over 17,000 kilometers in countries all over the world on expeditions. I have visited over 60, specifically on expeditions. I'd have to add that up, but it's got to be in the dozens.
All right. Pretty awesome. Let's see. Has it been all 7 continents?
The only continent I have not visited, I am missing, is Australia, believe it or not. It's such an amazing place, but it's, 25 hours or whatever it takes by airplane. So I haven't sort of wrapped my head around that part yet. The airplane ride is harder than running across deserts, I find sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. But think about the heat in the outback that you could experience.
And the indigenous peoples, right?
Yeah,
Of the
absolutely.
outback, to visit and learn. It'd be so cool.
Yeah, there we go. There's a goal for when things start to, return a little bit more to normal.
Yeah.
All right, let's grab another question here. Gail would like to know, who funds your explorations and adventures?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I have people that I've been collaborating with for years with my expeditions. And so I have the support of great companies. I'm a Canada Goose person. And so they help to design all of my gear for my cold weather expeditions and some of my desert expeditions as well. So I collaborate with different people, and they help for me to create the content. So I sort of live in this weird space, everyone, where being an explorer is sort of my full-time job. It's my gig. But at the end of the day, it's to support Impossible to Possible, which this mission that Bob and I have with youth. So these two things that I'm doing at once. So they sort of balance each other out, and it all finds its way to work out.
All right. But that's an important thing, to think about, is that there's many hats you have to wear as an explorer. Funding, the education side of things, planning and logistics, and all that kind of fun stuff, speaking and getting out places. So let's talk a little bit about logistics. How long does it take you to prepare for an expedition?
Expeditions in general for me take anywhere between a year and 4 years to plan and map. So every expedition that I'm doing, for the vast majority of the expeditions, I'm completely off-road. So I'm navigating across, wide open salt flats, mountain ranges, glaciers, it could be whatever. But I'm taking as direct a route as I possibly can. First of all, to take the shortest possible or the straightest possible route that would be the shortest without all the winding, from point to point across the desert. So that takes a lot of time because you have to find maps and you have to source, different topographical maps and learn, maybe visit the region first and go and learn from people in the area, and then make connections in those different places so that we can collaborate on logistics. It's really complicated. But when I have the goal in my mind of the place that I want to visit, it doesn't seem like work. It's the strangest thing. You're so involved and you're so immersed in this thing that you're so passionate about, the work actually becomes enjoyable. Stressful, but enjoyable.
All right. No, that's great. I mean, I think that should be everybody's goal, is to find something that you're so passionate about and spend your life doing it so it doesn't always feel like work.
Exactly.
Okay, let's see. Charles is wondering about a favorite adventure, maybe something that had the best end goal.
Wow, Charles, that's a great question. I'd have to say, I crossed the Sahara Desert, which if I had had more time, the slides that you didn't get to see, the second half is all about running 7,500 kilometers across the Sahara Desert. That was amazing for me because, I ran through 6 countries on that expedition. That one, I know how many countries, 6 countries, and got to see and experience all of Libya, for example, and Mali and Niger, and learn about the Tuareg culture. But I have to tell you, being Canadian, I live in Chelsea, Quebec. I have been to Baffin Island and I've crossed this one region of Baffin Island 9 times. 9 times, I believe, at last count. I love the Canadian Arctic so much that I'd have to say it's my favorite place to visit. And I love all the places I've been. Don't get me wrong, but there's a special place inside for me with our Canadian Arctic. It's so beautiful.
All right, pretty awesome. Sounds to me like we have a whole event we could do just on that journey through the desert.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see. So here, Ben's got another question here. What was the biggest challenge you faced while on one of your adventures?
The biggest challenge that I have faced on my adventures, I think more than anything, Ben, it's not the things that we would normally think about. I've had parasites, I've had injuries, I've been chased by wild boars on 2 different continents. I mean, I've had all kinds of crazy things happen to me. But I think it's the things that I learn about myself, or the lessons that I take from the places I've been. For example, being in Niger, in a place learning about the water crisis in North Africa as we made our way across the Sahara, and really realizing for the first time that at home in Canada, I just turn my tap on and water's instantly there. And it's not a judgy thing that, hey, I've taken it for granted all these years, but it really hit home that, wow, I'm so fortunate to have access, for example, to that water, but it goes beyond that. People coming together in Niger at a time when, this country is economically depressed in a way that we really have a hard time understanding, living the lifestyle that we have, yet having food with people and staying with people as we would visit with people along the way, and the happiness and the generosity that everyone had there to share what they did have, and the happiness that they took from having a shelter, a roof, and everybody's healthy and there's food to eat, and it was great food. That was a cause for celebration. I started to realize, wow, you know what? When I get home, I'm going to start smelling the flowers a little bit differently. So that kind of stuff was really sort of heavy to learn in the first place.
All right. So Maya was just listening to what you were just talking about, and she'd like to know a little more about what's a parasite, and maybe do you have a story about an encounter with
parasite stories? Okay, you want to do a whole other thing on parasites? We could do a whole other exploring by the seat of your pants on parasites. So parasites are, the scientists will correct me on my exact definition, but basically, in my case, the way I look at it is, it's something that wants to come into my body and live off of the resources of my body to survive. And so nothing wrong with parasites. Hey, they got to have them. I mean, that's part of our global ecosystem. But I, in the Amazon jungle on one of my trips, was fortunate enough to have a few new friends visit me in my leg and in my back. And they were tiny, tiny, couldn't even see them. They were actually, we were a couple of us stung by these bees. And apparently they told us there in that region of the Amazon that this parasite is sort of injected under your skin through the stinger of the bee. It rides on there. It's some sort of like, I don't know what you would call it, amoeba, bacteria, whatever. And anyhow, these things grew in my leg and in my back, and then they had to be removed and cut out. It was really gross. So now I have scars on my back and on my leg. I'm not showing you them, but I have these scars now from where those holes were in. And I've had internal parasites too, which are equally not so hot.
All right, just part of the adventure.
Part of the adventure.
Okay, so Lincoln wants to ask you, the longest border in the world is the US-Canadian border. ever planned to run the length of the border.
Wow, that Lincoln, he must be a smart kid. I think I might know him. Hey, Lincoln. Hi to you and your brother, Jackson. Lincoln, it's a great question. No, I have not considered that. Maybe your dad could do it for sure, but for me, I'm not sure. It's a great question. I'll have to think about it. You got me stumped.
All right. So training. I mean, what's your training regimen like? Are you just lucky in that, you had some good stamina already, or do you have to train pretty hard before every expedition?
Well, training and preparation goes along with the planning. So typically I'm doing one long expedition per year and sometimes a shorter project. The longer expeditions, I shift everything, including my nutrition and my focus, to prepare for one thing. So a year to a year and a half in advance, I do my big expedition. And, on that cycle between expeditions, I change everything. So for example, on my Arctic expeditions, I came off of an expedition in Namibia that I mentioned before, where I ran across the desert. And I'm training mostly in the hills. I live in the trails. And I'm mostly running really hard and, consuming a diet that's richer in carbohydrates, because I knew that I would be on a higher carbohydrate diet there. But in preparing for my Arctic expeditions, where I have to pull a sled and make my way across a landscape with all my stuff in the sled, I need nutrient-dense food. All my calories have to come in smaller portions so that I have less to carry. So I move over to a higher fat diet. So throughout the year, I transition from what I'm eating to a different source of fuel, to that fattier fuel. And I have to train my whole body to adapt to that while I'm running and lifting weights and getting as strong as I can to be able to pull that heavy sled. So that's sort of what my training looks like. It's very specific for the thing that I'm going to do.
Yep. So you mentioned that, you've run some endurance races in the past. Have you ever heard of one called the World Marathon Challenge?
The World Marathon Challenge? No, but it sounds awesome.
Yeah. So I have a friend, his name's Greg, and he just did this last year, 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. So pretty intense. Jump on a plane, go nonstop. And yeah, he got a little bit sick partway through, but he persevered and he made it through.
And then at the end of the 7 days, he just was eating hamburgers and fries and pizza because he was so hungry.
I imagine so. Absolutely. All right. Let's see. So we just had a question from Jackson come in, and Jackson's curious about the tally of the miles you've run on your expeditions.
Well, Jackson, so miles for you. So it would be, what's 17,000 kilometers in miles? So I guess this is about what? 10,000, 11,000, maybe 10,600.
Yeah, I think
miles?
a mile's about kilometers, but about 1.6.
So 0.6 miles to a kilometer. So 0.6. So look at, you're teaching math today too, Joe. This is fantastic.
Right.
So that's what you got to do, Jackson. 0.6 times 17,000, and you're going to get your number.
All right, a little homeschool homework for the audience.
Yeah. Don't tell me we don't have any more questions, Joe. I can't see the news feed here.
All right. Tell me a little bit more about the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and being an explorer in residence.
Well, being an explorer in residence for RCGS is really exciting for me because it opens up the potential to reach even more students, especially students that are interested in geography, globally and in context with Canada. So I've visited numerous schools in my region already with the CanGeo education program, and it's super exciting to be able to connect with students and see how excited they are about learning about geography from a different perspective. It's really exciting. So that's what I do with them. So I visit schools, I give presentations, I try to do stuff like we're doing today. This is a great organization, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So getting to volunteer time here, that's sort of my goal with our CGS, is reach as many students as I possibly can, sharing all those themes of adventure that we talked about before.
All right. We've got another question that just came in. Curious about the worst injury you had on an adventure.
The worst injury I've ever had on an adventure was probably in running the Sahara, as we made our end, as we were reaching, probably the 7,000 kilometer mark, 6,800 kilometer mark. I started to develop tremendous pain in my shins. Now, if you're talking about running injuries, because I've had all other kinds of injuries, but the pain that I had was so intense that the doctor that was on the expedition, that was helping with the expedition, said, look, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to jinx you in any way, right? But you could very potentially have stress fractures in your shins. I can't even describe to you how bad the pain was, but I was so committed to completing that expedition that I, with him helping me and wrapping my legs and everything, I was able to will myself to get through it. And eventually it did go away. There was a lot of walking involved, and it took, my goodness, weeks for it to go away. But I got there, obviously, to the east coast of the Sahara. But I've had other injuries. I've had frostbite. This last January, the craziest thing that ever happened to me, this last January, I was on an expedition from Qikiqtarjuaq across that bit of the Davis Strait, the frozen sea ice off of the island of Qikiqtarjuaq, in through the fjords, onto Baffin, across Baffin to the Akshake Pass, down the other side, into the Pangertung Fjord on the other side. It was so cold in January because there's only a few hours of daylight each day. And I started out, first day I did close to 50 kilometers pulling my sled. My goal was do the whole thing in 6 days. It was very difficult and long. And second day went really well. Third day, the wind starts to pick up. I'm feeling it. And now the terrain is getting really difficult. I'm pulling my sled over giant rocks and boulders and sand. And there's a big hole in my sled. And I'm working so hard. And I got my goggles on because the headwinds have begun. And because I'm warm and it's minus 50, maybe minus 60 with the wind out there, it's freezing and condensing my goggles. So now I can't see out of my goggles. I'm doing one of these things. So I had to move the goggles to the top of my head and pull all of my face mask right up to just below. So there's only a little bit of my eyes showing it. And the winds got so strong on day 4 and 5. And I didn't think anything of it until I woke up on day 5 and my eyes were so swollen, my eyelids, I could barely open them. I wear contact lenses, believe it or not. I had to put my contact lenses in that so cold. And I get up from my camp and I got started. And when I finished the expedition, I looked in the mirror and I had frostbitten all my eyelids. And they were like, they turned all black and they were like huge. They were like golf balls, but they healed. They're still red. You can't see it on the camera right now. Maybe you can, but they're still red.
Huh, wild.
That was a tough one.
So building on that question, this is another question that's just come in. I have some friends who, adventure around the world, and some of them are ocean rowers. They've had to be rescued in the middle of storms or when things go wrong. Have you ever had to be rescued or airlifted from a location?
No, I do my very best with my expeditions and planning. I like to say that I plan my expeditions more than I plan my drive to the grocery store. And that's saying a lot because these days, with COVID, we're going to the grocery store, we plan the time, we clean our groceries, we do all the things, we mitigate so that we're not spreading disease in any way, hopefully. And still, I plan those expeditions like you can't believe. So my goal always is it is the absolute last resort for me personally, that I want to call for rescue. It's good to know that it's there, but I don't want to put others at risk for something that I've chosen to do. So I do the very best I can to plan every footstep that I'm going to take. There was a time in 2017 when I was in way up in northern Labrador, crossing a region of northern Labrador into Quebec, where I broke through some ice in the winter. They had we're having a lot of unusual winters these days, as everyone knows. And I broke through some ice and to make a long story short, spent 2 days with my teammate after I was in this river and for several minutes, got out, changed out my clothing, but still I was hypothermic. Spent 2 days at frostbite on my toes, 2 days trekking to a point where my photographer, John, who you saw took the pictures of Mongolia that I showed you guys before, John was with some friends of ours, Inuit hunters, who were coming from the other end of this peninsula of land, we'll call it. And they were way up photographing caribou, and they had to work their way down. Stefano and I camped, and they at a specific point, base of a mountain, and they had to work their way down over the course of 2 days to come and get us. So that was the one time that I had rescued, but it was by snowmobile.
All right.
Long answers to my questions, eh?
No, good answers. Stories. They should questions or answers should come with stories. Absolutely. So when Shang is wondering when you started exploring, so maybe how old were you when you went on your first ultra distance run or your first expedition?
Well, that's a really great question because I am 51 years old. And my first expedition or my first steps running were real running was when I was 34. And at 30 years of age was when I first started doing any activity of this sort of stuff with any sort of seriousness. I formerly was a unhealthy guy, pack-a-day smoker, sedentary, was not into high school sports, was not much of a student. Joe, you could probably tell, right? Maybe with some of my thing, yeah. But I luckily and somehow graduated from high school and made it into community college, but did not finish community college, dropped out. And so I was very much a person who, when I was younger, was always feeling unfulfilled, unhappy, and without passion. And it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that my younger brother, John, who is this amazing athlete, Ironman triathlete, ice climber, and rock climber, and mountain biker, I saw in him this guy who was so confident and passionate about what he did. And I felt like I was lacking that in my own life. I was just someone who would start things and never finish them and just was not generally a very happy person. And I so desperately wanted to feel like he did that I thought, well, the solution might be to do the things that my brother does. So I challenged myself to change my unhealthy habits and quit smoking and all the other things I was doing, and try to transition into a different life. And then when I did, it took me some time to do that because the hardest things we do in our life are very relative to us as individuals. We can't compare that situation with anyone else. So that was very difficult for me. It took me a long time. It took me 3 years. But once I made that switch, my life changed 180 degrees. And that's when I started to discover that, hey, wow, life has started over and I've got this ability to do these things. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. That's how it all started. My very first running race was not a 5K or a 10K. I had done some adventure racing, but my very first actual running race was a 100-mile or 160-kilometer running race in the Yukon in February 2004, which I actually won. So if I could do that, we can do anything, right?
Absolutely. No, it's a great story. And I think that's a really good point is there's never a wrong time to start something new, try something new, push yourself, chase your passion. It doesn't matter if you're 5, 10, 30, 60.
I think it's true of all of us that at times in our lives, we underestimate what we are capable of doing physically, mentally, emotionally. People of all ages can do so much more than we think we can. And that's become my, my internal philosophy when I'm doing these things is I tell myself over and over again, hey, you might think you can't, but you can get this done.
All right. So one more question for you, Ray. Gail says she just read your book, Running to Extremes. Have you written anything else recently?
Oh, wow. Thank you, Gail. So now that's officially 3 people that have read my book. This is exciting. I love it. No, thank you so much. And for other young people out there or students out there, that book is in your school library. You can find it. I'm actually working on my 3rd book right now, which I'm hoping will be done sometime next year. Now that I'm home so much, my buddy Andrew's helping me to write it. Now that I'm home so much and he's home so much with everything that we're dealing with the pandemic, perhaps we'll write it even faster. Who knows? But we're working on it right now. So totally stoked for that. And I write a lot on my Facebook page and on my Instagram page. You'll see little things that I write. So you can join me there too.
All right. Awesome. Well, Ray, what a pleasure. Thanks so much for taking a little bit of time to hang out with us today. Obviously, a huge shout out to the groups who tuned in via YouTube and those who will catch the recording live today. Thanks for tuning in and sending in some questions. And yeah, Ray, what a story. I mean, amazing locations, amazing feats of pushing your body and then, sharing it with others and inspiring others. So thanks so much for doing that for us today.
Well, thanks, Joe. Thank you for having me. And thanks to everyone out there who tuned in. It's awesome. Thank you. See you again.
All right. Awesome. Thanks again, everyone. Stick around for another 15 minutes. We're going live to the Vancouver Aquarium at 11, and we're going to talk about the deep sea. So we hope to see some of you joining in for that event as well.
I want to
Thanks
go with
again,
that one.
everyone. Yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you soon.